Hello, Blackhawks fans. Welcome to another edition of the Four Feathers podcast. We are back following the conclusion of the 2024-25 Chicago Blackhawks season. And gentlemen, we have a first this evening on the Four Feathers podcast. It is the first time that you will hear from myself, Ron Luce, Tony Marchese, and Steve all on the same show. What's up, guys?
Oh, yeah. What's going on?
How we doing? How's everybody feeling now that we've been able to digest the end of the Chicago Blackhawks season about a week ago?
I'm doing all right. Feels bittersweet, but I'm already looking forward to the next season. So, yeah.
I feel that. Tony?
Is it October yet? I'm ready for October. Let's just fast forward through summer. We'll get back. The kids will be on the ice. I'll be happy again. I just started to fall in love with this team, and it feels like it's over. Ron, I got a question for you. What are you sipping on right
now? I will be 1,000% honest. I forgot the name of it, but it's a new thing that I'm trying. Just a little bourbon, a little nightcap for this evening. A little celebratory Cubs on Tap victory is in this glass as well, and just some love for the brand here on the old glass too. We love to see it. But, gentlemen, we are back, as we noted, to, in years past, this was like the funeral episode is what we referred to it as. And as I think
last year, you and I got dressed up in suits for this episode.
I think we did.
Or at least I was in a full suit.
I think we did. I believe we did. And that became a common theme because the last how many years of Blackhawks hockey were just bitterly awful.
Miserable.
I don't think that's the feeling necessarily this year that a lot of people have. Like, yes, it was still a bad season, and yes, they still have the second best NHL draft lottery odds. But at the end of the day, the optimism feels up. And I think a lot of that is obviously related to the kids, but some encouraging play toward the end of the season, some growth over the course of the season, and pretty much all the stuff that we're going to get into here tonight. But guys, speaking of some of that growth, just some of the numbers from kind of that late stretch in the season that I think, Tony, to your point, is what a lot of fans started to fall in love with this team. Frank Nazar's emergence, obviously Sam Rinzel and Oliver Moore and Ryan Green joining the team for the last handful of games of the season. Notably, Bedard in the last 4 games of the season, 7 points, 3 goals, 4 assists. He was on a heater to end the year. Ended the season with 67 points, which was good for the team lead. In addition to that, Frank Nazar in 8 April games, he had 9 points. 3 of those outings were multi-point affairs. He had 5 goals and 4 assists, but even more importantly, over those last 3 games, he had 5 points. 2 of those games were multi-point efforts. So really good from him. Rinzel had 5 assists in 9 games and played a ton of ice time over that course and time period as well. And Spencer Knight and Arvid Soderblom were largely pretty good down the stretch. Obviously, some growing pains, I think, for both of them, but overall, good feelings, I think, concluding the season. So, gentlemen, we'll get with the microscope first here, and then we'll go big picture for the rest of the season because we haven't talked about that last handful of games this year. Reflections, thoughts, comments, opinions on what we saw on the ice from the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, for me, I thought it was really encouraging. A lot of those numbers that the fans were getting excited about, I was too, especially with Nazar. I think he wrote it down, 7.97 scoring chances per 60 minutes. So pretty nice for Nazar, who I thought he picked up his game from when he first showed up in the NHL. So Nazar was extremely encouraging. One thing I did take into consideration with watching these last games was like they were playing against teams that were like getting ready for the playoffs. So they weren't like necessarily playing 100%. But fuck that. Like, I don't want to be like the Debbie Downer. Like, I'm going to take like any positive that I can get, like Nazar looking great, Rinzel making his debut, looking spectacular. So for me, I was happy with how the season ended, and I'm ready for the next season to start.
100%. Tone?
I'll echo everything Steve said. I mean, coming down the stretch, you started to see a hockey team that played cohesively. You started to see some of these new names slip into the lineup That goes back to Renzel and Oliver Moore, and there was so much there for a Chicago Blackhawks fan that had been watching this team the entire season to get excited about. And you could look on almost any single line, and there was a new face, someone to watch with a little bit more critical eye, someone to watch with a little bit of intrigue, and I think Sam Renzel was probably the one that stood out to me the most down the stretch, but Oliver Moore, speed kills. I mean, Ron, you wrote an excellent little recap right when both of those guys came up. Ron's Blackhawks thoughts, and it was titled appropriately. But everything you said in that article, also, I think most people were feeling at that time, and I think they closed the season strong. You end on a high note. You get 2 back-to-back overtime games with some free hockey in them. It was just a little bit of a treat, but it was also sort of a glimpse into the future, and it left you wanting more. And I think Steve hinted on that. I hinted on it in the opening. I'm ready to watch this team play hockey again. It's almost sort of sad that it took until then to culminate at the NHL level. Seeing some of these guys, and I'm sure we'll get into which names deserve to be up here and which ones need a little more seasoning in Rockford.
Mm-hmm.
But what an end to a terrible year. You finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what got me excited, because you could have ended this year and not gotten to see Frank Nazar come into his own. No Sam Renzel, but Artem Levshunov was a surprise call-up to me, just
Definitely.
based on how we talked about him all season as a guy that probably won't touch the NHL level. And he looked, in his stint here, comfortable playing defense at the NHL level. So there was a lot of good that came at the end of the season, and really sort of makes the beginning of this year feel like it was in the distant past, like it was almost a completely different season once that page turned. So I don't want to go too nitty-gritty into everything, but I will say it was an excellent end to the year for the Chicago Blackhawks.
Most definitely. And echoing as well all of what you guys had to share, right? I think the end of the season, in a nutshell, brought a lot of hope, right? That hope that I think every Blackhawks fan's been looking to cling on to for a long time. And the first domino of that was certainly Connor Bedard and winning the draft lottery and his draft year and everything like that. But then now you're starting to see the fruits of the labor. You're starting to see what Kyle Davidson has been drafting and developing, and a lot of these guys are starting to at least get to the AHL level, if not the NHL level. And I think that's always the hardest part of the rebuild, in my opinion, is not so much, oh, this team's going to be terrible on the ice, which is certainly a part of it. Don't get me wrong. But it's you got all the crap left over from the last regime. There's that weird gap of it's not that great because all the fruits of the labor of the new front office have yet to be realized, or at least even given a glimpse at a level that's worthy enough of an evaluation, whether it's the AHL level or the NHL level. So I completely agree with you guys there. Obviously, you guys mentioned Renzel, you guys mentioned Oliver Moore. He's so fast, he makes fast people look not fast. And, we got some of the Spencer Knight as well. And I think, if nothing else, guys, to me, the end of the season created a lot of questions, but they're good questions. They're good problem questions to have. And one of the ones I pitched, Tony, in the article that you mentioned is kind of the future blue line dynamics. Who's going to play what roles on the blue line? Because right now it looks like they have enough guys that are at least NHL ready to give a cup of coffee to next season. And then you can play who's here for the long haul and who's not game, and then make the adjustments as you need to then moving forward. So again, not to get too nitty gritty, but something to kick around here. Guys, I want to ask you both this question, because I've seen a lot of this over the last 2 weeks. It's been nice to unplug and completely step away and just kind of watch from the sideline of just the pulse on the Blackhawks rebuild and how the fans feel and things like that after the end of the season. The Sharks rebuild is looked at in this high echelon of bright future and it's going to be great and this, that, and the other. And yet the Blackhawks are looked at like it's a failure when in reality, they're in probably about the same place, if not the Sharks a hair behind, just because they totally burned it to the ground later. Why is there this double standard that exists among the national hockey opinion of like the Blackhawks in such a terrible position because Connor Bedard as a teenager is setting teenage records and there is a glimpse of the future coming. But Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith are butt buddies and they make fucking TikToks together. Like it's this weird double standard of like, you can make the argument that both teams are in a similar position with maybe the Hawks a little ahead of that. And yet it's like everything in teal looks like it's this beautiful piece of art. And yet everything in red, black, and white is frowned upon. Like it's, you know, a newspaper.
Yeah. And I think what, like,
I'll let Steve touch this first.
Yeah, I got a lot of feelings about this because it's frustrating, right? Like, I think a lot of it is because people are jealous of what the Blackhawks had in the previous decade, and we get Connor Bedard, and so it's just kind of like shit on the Blackhawks season. And when you look at the Sharks, they don't have a prospect pool that's as deep as the Blackhawks. So, I mean, yeah, like, they are at similar levels, and don't get me wrong, like I do like the some of the moves that their GM Mike Greer did. I think he's doing a fine job, but I think we need to pump the brakes on like, oh my God, the Sharks are like they're having a blast. Like, look, like losing doesn't really matter to them, and that's the thing is like, you know, you see Bedard, like people like to say he's like crying and pouting every single night. Well, Bedard really cares about his job. He has a lot of pride in his game. So like, of course he's going to be pissed off. And also he was like the only like teenager in the team for like half the season. But for the Sharks, like, I don't know if like I would really appreciate seeing my future players like not giving a shit that they're in last place. Like, sure, there's like one thing of like making fun of a shitty situation. That's good. But like, to the point where it's like you're saying, like just making TikToks of like riding like little tricycles on the ice. Like, I don't know. To me, it paints the image that like you don't care that you're in last place. Like, I know for a fact that Bedard gives a shit that like this team is kind of sucking for the past couple of years.
100%. It's weird when a guy that you played in like NHL 10 with on like your roster because you needed to fill out your third line is now the GM of the San Jose Sharks, but that's neither here nor there. Tony, I know you have an opinion on this.
Well, I think Steve hinted on some stuff. And yes, Ronald, I do have an opinion on this. Steve hinted on one thing, and it's Blackhawks fatigue. I think that's the number one thing in the national mediascape is Blackhawks fatigue. Because if you go back into 2009, when Kane and Taves were coming up, and until this very moment, the NHL has really relied on the Chicago Blackhawks to carry media ratings, right? Like, there's a reason they were in the Winter Classic this year. It was to sell Connor Bedard. And if we start to take a look at how that panned out for the Chicago Blackhawks, it was ugly. When you had the national media watching their practice, I remember the story. I'm not sure if it was Biz that brought this up. I'm pretty sure it was that they had been on the ice for about a half an hour trying to do a drill where everybody needed to score before you get off of it. And you start to see that, man, it looks like a shit show here. And it was. If you go back to the December, early January, this team didn't know its head from its ass. You also had a coach get fired pretty early on into a rebuild cycle. You had a lot of veteran signings that didn't work out. You had some unfulfilled promises from Kyle Davidson that didn't get met. And Steve, shout out to your article that was published today examining Kyle Davidson's 2024-25 season. You pointed that out in there that, there were things that were said that this team was going to be better and take a step forward. If you start to look at the larger picture here, you can see that wasn't going to be how this season was going to go. Probably sometime in, I don't know, late October, early November, we had a tracker that was counting up all the games that they were going to want back. It got to like 9 or 10 games by the time we reached mid-November. So when you're floundering like this, there's a really easy target. If you're the national media, there's a really easy target right there. And it's Connor Bedard isn't happy in Chicago because he's pissed off because the team is losing and the GM says they're going to be better. And let's make this out to be the biggest fucking disaster that we possibly can, because that's going to draw attention. It's a lot harder for you as a national media writer to draw up all this interest in San Jose unless you paint it to be like the next best thing. You can't go in there and say, oh, it's a shit show in San Jose. Who the fuck cares about San Jose hockey outside of San Jose fans? The Chicago Blackhawks are going to be a story regardless. And it's much easier to paint this as it's not good until you get to the point where you see Sam Renzel, Artem Levshunov, Frank Nazar starting to come out of the woodwork, and it looks good. So in my opinion, that's where the double standard comes from. It's a lot easier to sell a headline when it's chaos in Chicago than it is chaos in San Jose.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the end of it, right, a painted picture, nonetheless, not a true picture when it's all said and done. A good friend of On Tap Sportsnet and my fellow co-host over on Bears on Tap, Mr. Sonny Verma, says, folks weren't happy when the Blackhawks got the number 1 pick to select Bedard because of some of the decisions of the previous front office and ownership off the ice. It's been an easy franchise to not root for if you are not from Chicago or just simply a Blackhawks fan. And that's 100% true as well, right? There has been a lot of media attention on the Chicago Blackhawks, not necessarily for all the correct reasons as well. And Tony, that entirely plays into that narrative, Steve, as you pointed as well, right? Like the Blackhawks have an easy target on their back. And I do think that's part of the double standard. I just think it's so very interesting at the end of the day of just witnessing kind of what that, what it is in that national media landscape, and then kind of sitting back as a Blackhawks fan and just kind of tilting your head and scratching your nose a little bit about the narrative that is being painted with the state of the team and what's to come in the future. But before, gentlemen, we get to the future, let's talk about the past. And in the sense of just some totals, what the team looked like this year, who led in what categories, et cetera, et cetera. Final record for the Chicago Blackhawks this year, 25, 46, and 11. That's good for 61 points. That's a .372 point percentage, which was 31st in the NHL, as we have already noted. Ryan Donato leads the team in goals with 31, by far a career high. I believe previous to that, I think his career high was 14 or 16. So literally almost doubled his career high this season in goals. But Connor Bedard, still your leader in both assists and points, respectively. He had 44 and 67 in each of those categories. But worth noting, Teuvo Teravainen had a really good season as well. Teuvo finishes with 58 points. I believe that's his highest total since, I think, 2021. It's been a hot minute since Teuvo's really hit those numbers. And at the end of the day, 15 goals for him, 43 helpers. And we noted Donato's really good season with 31 goals. He also had the same amount of assists for 31, 62 points for Ryan Donato. He was number 2 on the team in that category. So, gentlemen, I think that's the kind of the state of this team, right? It was a little top heavy scoring wise, right? A lot of the faith in a lot of that scoring came later in the season. Nazar's kind of offense, I think, more finally clicking. Steve, you noted it with his underlying numbers. The scoring chances were there all season. It's just a lot more of those pucks were going in the back of the net or onto the sticks of eventual goal scorers than they were earlier in the year for a guy like Frank Nazar. So, it kind of lends to a lot of questions about the future. And I do want to hammer it a little harder later in the show because we have some future looking topics that we are going to talk about. But I want to get a feeling from you guys now that, again, a week has elapsed. We all know that Blackhawks hockey in 2024-25, the storybook's closed. We're getting that, the autographed copy of the novel from the author. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important do you rank this offseason upcoming for the Blackhawks? In a totality sense. And I mean that from who's making the team, right? And just the aura of how many young guys are getting opportunities versus do they try to rely on older guys again? Or is this just full-blown keys to the kids, the free agency period, and even the draft? Because let's be real, you can't pick worse than 4. You're going to have an opportunity, a guy who maybe doesn't start the season in Chicago, but damn well will be up by the end of the season, more likely than not. On a scale of 1 to 10, what's your number? How important do you see this offseason upcoming?
For me, I think I'm going to go with a 9, just because there could always be a room where you need more.
Okay.
And I think it's not necessarily from the players. I think it's starting with the coach. He really needs to nail this head coach hiring. And then I'll worry about what kind of players he adds to the team.
Tony?
So I know this offseason feels ultra important, and it does to me as well. However, I feel like there's going to be a more important offseason coming behind it. So I'm going to give this about a strong 7.5 in terms of a number. Now, the head coach hire is going to be important. Yes, I know the name that everybody's going to want is David Carl. There's a chance that doesn't work out. And there's a chance that this Hawks rebuild doesn't go off the tracks just because they don't wind up with David Carl. You're still probably a couple of years away from competing for a Stanley Cup, let alone a potential playoff position. Now, depending on who you bring in and who you don't, from a free agency standpoint, I would find it pretty hard to believe that if you ran the kids out there next season, even if, say, you don't make any acquisitions, you bring back Ryan Donato, I think you've got a better roster than you did when you entered the 2024-25 season. And so I don't think they're exactly going to take a step back. There's going to be growing pains. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know if this is the exact offseason where you're going to see everything come into the fold the way you want it to. Now, obviously, there's going to be some roster shuffle. There's going to be spots to fill. There's going to be guys that the Hawks have already probably evaluated that without a strong camp are going to get some seasoning in Rockford. And you're going to need a couple of veterans to come in here, probably at least one defenseman and some guys that build a little bit of redundancy and a little bit of a safety net for any injuries and all that good stuff. However, I don't know if Kyle Davidson's going to go out and mortgage everything. What I think is going to be important is the draft, right? You're not, as you mentioned, you're not picking lower than 4. But the real question here is this team setting up? If you're Kyle Davidson, the real decision you have to make is, are you setting up to be another bottom feeder team next year and make a run for another top 5 pick? Or are you going to actually take that step forward that you said was going to happen this year? And I think it's probably going to be that step forward next year where you're seeing them pick closer to 10, 12, somewhere in that range instead of top 5. And I think that is a great step forward there, probably less focused on selling veterans at the deadline, maybe making an acquisition for someone, using some draft capital that's already in store for next year's draft. I think it's going to be kind of hard to really fuck this offseason up if you're Kyle Davidson, because you can kind of hold steady. You've got the coach, you've got the draft. I don't think you really have to focus on bringing someone in, even though you know this, Ron, and this is probably weird for me to say. I don't think that there's like a real need to rush anything, because you have all of this stuff and you need to figure out what it is and how it meshes together before you can really figure out what it is that you actually need to go out there and supplement what this is right now. So, you end up with a Misa and he's ready to play right out of the draft. That's a potential top 6 forward that you're adding in right away. I don't know if you need to rush out and sign someone. Again, by the time we get to June, I'm going to be sitting there going like, let's sign some people. But looking at it right now, a week after, I'm sitting here going, hey, you know what? Those guys were gelling together towards the end of the year. I don't know if it's as much of an immediate impact because there's going to be chances for the next 2 years for you to go out and find that piece that supplements this team the right way. I'd rather them somewhat not rush into something that they're going to regret or something that prevents them from locking up the talent that they need to. So I'm pretty happy with the youth movement. That might bite us, but as I sit here right now, that's where I'm at. Ron, I'm curious what your answer is to this.
Well, first off, I'm going to reel you back in, and I'm not going to go nearly as deep as you did because we got to save that for a little bit later in the show. But I think I settled right between the two of you, but for different reasons. My number is like an 8.25. A lot of that weighs on the head coaching hire. And here's why. To Tony's point, are you playing this slow and are you looking for a bridge coach? Or are you playing it, we're ready to compete now and we're going to go for the big gun? There's a lot of question marks there. Or do you kind of get the best of both worlds and you go for the big gun knowing that maybe 2 years down the road is the real timeline of when this team's truly competitive? For those reasons, that's an important aspect to this offseason. In addition to that, I think the more important topic that we need to be focusing on, and this is the GM Ron brain speaking here, it's not acquisitions. It's not who are we signing on July 1st who is outside of the organization, but rather who are you potentially signing on July 1st that is inside the organization? You have a lot of important extensions coming up that are going to very much dictate the landscape of how you spend money over those next maybe 2 important off seasons that are coming up. Obviously, the cap is rising, but Connor Bedard is eligible for an extension, as is a player like Frank Nazar, as are a couple of these young defensemen. Who are you going to pay? Is Wyatt Kaiser a part of the future? Is he worth a 3-year contract at a reasonable dollar amount to stick around? Or is he a trade chip all of a sudden because you don't think he's a part of the future, but might look really good somewhere else and you can get a forward piece that's young and ready to gel with this youth? I think there's almost more questions internally, and Tone, like you said, right? They have a lot of stuff and they got to kind of figure some of that stuff out. I think there's the move to make the moves outside the organization that'll be needed, but there's 2 ways you can approach that. Is it we're giving money to guys for long terms, i.e. a Bennett type of player, or are you going more with like a Roslovic type player who's probably more like a 2-year guy, right? Like, are you going the Mitch Marner path or are you signing
Spencer Knight's also eligible too, isn't he, Ron?
Yes, he is.
And do you want to go in? Do you want to go into next offseason with Spencer Knight as a UFA? I don't.
So there's almost more to me moving pieces internally. I think the coaching hire is the first domino of how Davidson plays the offseason. I think we'll see that eventually happen of, this feels like a bridge coach. Like if Anders Sorensen gets a 2-year contract to be the head coach, for example, that's a bridge coach. But if it is David Carl, that's okay, we're going to get the guy now. And maybe next year's a little better, but like we're still probably 2 years away. But now it's like, there's a little bit more expectation driven up of where this team is over the coming year. So again, I'll reel myself back in and say it's about an 8.25 for me for more reasons internal than external is kind of the bottom line when it's all said and done. Steve, I feel like you have a rebuttal to something here.
Yeah, no, I get what you guys are saying. For me, it's like, we are going to be a bad team next year again. Hopefully nowhere near as bad as we were this year. I cannot do another tank season. And like, I know that people are going to want to finish near the bottom next year just because the number 1 consensus kid is already named, and that's Bedard's cousin, Gavin McKenna. Yeah, if you draft that kid, like that's amazing. But we can't be losing like this again. And with the young players that we have, like Connor Bedard, who you could see it, like this kid was taking every loss to heart, and over time that wears you down, especially when you're young, because you don't have like that experience of like knowing how to deal with that type of losing. if you bring in a young coach or somebody who knows how to work with young players, while somebody like Carl, he might not have that experience with coaching an NHL team. He knows how to coach a winning team and he knows how to coach young players. So let's say we do sign Carl. I'm not expecting this team to be good, even sniffing playoffs next year, but I am expecting him to work with Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar and having them just play their game. That way they're developing at the NHL and they're not getting in this mental rut, because I really liked what I saw from Frank Nazar, and I think that we might have our number 2 center. I'm not making any declarations on that. However, we don't know how he will respond to like 2 seasons in a row of just absolute dog shit hockey. He's got great confidence, but I mean, Bedard had swagger when he first came into the league. And like, if I'm being honest, like I didn't see that swagger at all last season. So for me, that coaching hire is important just because of the young players that we have. That's my piece.
No, I think that's spot on as well. I think too, you mentioned with Carl and Anthony Tony, great comment here, right? Could grow with the team, right? And so
what a great name Anthony Tony is, by the way.
Anthony Tony, great name indeed. And I think just quickly responding to this comment, having Vince Vaughn talk to John Cooper, right? That's like a we're ready to win now move, is when you go try to get a guy like John Cooper at this point in the rebuild. So I think there's again a lot of moving pieces. Anthony said a little bit earlier, head coach 10 for him was his number. Really good question here too, though, because again we can't settle right on McKenna and 26 or anything like that. Again, ping pong balls are weird and sometimes they bounce in the right direction, but this is a great question. Can you go into next season with only one D-man that's over the age of 23, and that one D-man being Connor Murphy?
Can I answer this question?
Sure.
I think you can in the starting lineup, but you need some veteran deep presence, a la an Alec Martinez or someone around it. TJ Brody's probably getting bought out. So you're going to need to bring another veteran deep presence in there. And it's probably going to be ugly. It's probably going to cost you a couple of games, but who are you sitting down? You probably are already starting the season with Kevin Korchinski in Rockford again next year, barring a really strong camp. And you've got another 5 defenders that have cracked the lineup already. You got to figure out what to do with some of these guys. And here's the question. One of these guys is going to have to get moved. The only way to build value is letting NHL scouts see him at the NHL level and seeing that they can play that way, versus why can't this guy crack the roster over the other young guys here? So you're going to have to play a little bit of games in the beginning of the season. Might not be pretty, but there's probably going to be a move. If it doesn't come this summer, it's coming at the NHL trade deadline next year. So yeah, I think you can.
Yeah, agreed. I'm not gonna. I think there's a way you can. I think there's a way though that like a veteran depth of some point is worth it, but it's how much do you invest?
Absolutely,
is how I
absolutely.
Steve, any disagreement with that kind of consensus?
No, I agree. I think like now is the time to just let these kids develop and play at the NHL level, which, you know, I've said it before, NHL and I'd argue the AHL aren't developmental leagues, but you can absolutely use them to develop players. And I think when you have these young players like Sam Renzel, he does not need to even know what Rockford looks like. And I would even argue that Kevin Korchinski, despite how bad he's looked on defense, I would be okay with him in the starting lineup next year. And that might be like a hot take because like physically, like he looked terrible on defense, but it's his offense that I care about. And I think he's going to be able to hone those offensive skills only with competition and talent at the NHL level. But yeah, I agree with what you'd said, Tony.
And kind of along those lines, this was relating to Bedard, but right, you even mentioned this with Korchinski. Like he looked faster when he plays with faster players, right? And that's natural. Sure, you look quicker because the way that Connor Bedard sees the game, he might not be the most elite skater in the world, he's a good skater. He's not a bad skater by any stretch of imagination. But when you play with really fast players, you can make the crazy, outlandish plays because those guys can actually catch up with the rush. And that's critically important, I think, for players like Bedard, too. So just, again, a lot of good and interesting points along there as well. Gentlemen, speaking of Kevin Korchinski, also speaking quickly of Frank Nazar, what an appropriate world that he could be the future captain of this team. And his number is just a reciprocal of that of the last proper captain of this team.
Did you just like randomly drop in there that Frank Nazar could be the captain, the next captain of this team? Like, I feel like that was super casual. Like you tried to slide it in there.
Yeah.
That nobody else would hear it. But I heard it. So I need Steve's reaction to it. You're for it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, he has that swagger. He's confident. And I think that rubs off on his peers. And, he's got what it takes to be a leader. The way he talks to the media and already at such a young age, I think people look up to him around his age at the NHL. I think it would be a fine captain, to be honest.
Jonathan Toews was a leader by example, Tony. Just like Frank Nazar.
I've got a follow-up question to that. By March of next year, is Nick Foligno cracking this Blackhawks lineup?
Maybe.
Oh God.
It depends.
And see here's the follow-up to that question. Did they maybe prematurely name a captain because he was acting as the de facto captain?
No. Adrian Aucoin wore the captaincy the year like a year or two before Jonathan Toews wore it.
Okay.
I think it's fine. I think go ahead, Steve.
I was just gonna say, like, it's important to have a captain. It identifies the leader. There's actual on ice stuff that goes on with talking to refs and all that. But it's also kind of like a ceremonious thing, kind of like the Queen of England. I don't know. That's how I view it. It is a big deal, but it's also not.
I want to echo what Steve had to say, and this is how I would approach it with a past Blackhawks roster. Think about that rookie year Taves Kane team. They didn't have a captain, but it wasn't because there was a lack of leadership on that team. It was an older team with a pair of rookies named Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, right? Like Dunks and Siebes had already been up for 2 seasons at that point. So they were young, but they were a little more established. But then you had the likes of Robert Lang and Martin Lapointe and all these older players who could kind of all be around and help a smaller group of young kids. I think having the dad figure almost in a lot of ways of Nick Foligno as your captain helps the copious amount of young kids you have coming all at once for this wave of Chicago Blackhawks hockey. So that's how I would kind of identify that. But gentlemen, speaking of the youth of this team and pushing us along here in some of our topics we want to get to tonight, the Rockford Ice Hogs and Chicago Wolves are 40 seconds away from overtime in playoff game number 1. It's a 1-1 game. Kevin Korchinski scoring in that game. And some notable names that are down with the Rockford Ice Hogs. Right at the end of the season, Korchinski, Del Mastro, and Levshinov were all assigned to the Rockford Ice Hogs to join the Calder Cup playoff chase. In addition to that, the Rockford Ice Hogs signed an amateur tryout contract with Cameron Rowe, who is the Western Michigan goaltender who won the national title at the NCAA level, as well as a few notable prospects joining the team and getting some run here, including Aiden Thompson, a Denver product, as we've talked heavily already about David Carl. Merrick Van Acker getting a taste, just like Nick Lardis did at the end of last season, even though he will be going back to Brantford next year. And then AJ Spalesi also joining the Ice Hogs to just be around as a part of this. So a lot of youth currently with that younger group, but it's a 1-1 hockey game right now. We'll keep people updated, and it's going to overtime. End of the third period. Cole Gutman assisted on the Kevin Korchinski goal. Gentlemen, we've got some favorites to talk about from the season. And I think it's time to let these things unleashed. It's just the picking favorites. We've got 5 topics of favorites, or I guess least favorites, even thrown into this mix. that we each have from this past year. To start things off, our first one is favorite player to watch from this season. Who was the player that each of you just enjoyed the most, genuinely were maybe drawn to for one reason or another? Who was that guy that anytime they were on the ice, you kind of sat up a little bit in your chair compared to when you were watching the rest of the game?
I'm gonna go with Sam Renzel because like when he stepped on the ice from his very first shift, he looked like he had played in the NHL already. He could skate, he could move, he knows where to be. He was always calm, and it gave me a lot of hope for what potential he has. So I'm gonna go with Sam Renzel.
I think that's a great pick, Tony.
I like that Sam Renzel pick from Steve. That was high on my consideration list as well. Just excellent stuff from Renzel. Big Bird, if you will. That's his nickname. If you don't know yet. I'm gonna go with surprise, Ron. Can you figure out who it is yet? Any guesses? It's a goalie. It's a goalie. It's Spencer Knight. What a fantastic acquisition! And as a resident goalie guy, finally getting a number one goaltender for the future in here. Not a prospect, not someone who needs to work on stuff, and minor stick taps. It's not stick tap time yet, but Arvid Soderblom had a great year. When Spencer Knight came here, there was a different energy around this team. Just a completely different energy. And maybe some of that was a little bit of an addition by subtraction. But in the crease, Spencer Knight looks just about as fundamentally sound as a goaltender that I think we've seen here since Corey Crawford. And it was just incredible to watch him play. He's on the ice all the time, Ron, so I got to enjoy it for a full 60 minutes every night his name was in the lineup. But I just thought that, maybe there was a little step back off of the initial arrival in Chicago. He battled through a little bit of things, had a little bit of adversity, but then finished the season strong again. I didn't see, though, within the sort of downturn times where he was giving up a couple too many goals. There was still the same work ethic, still the same solid fundamentals. Looks like a guy that's going to be a real threat to steal games as a goaltender. And I think the one thing that separates good goalies from great goalies is that ability to steal games. And we saw him do that a couple of times in front of a really weak and young defense at certain points in times. Faced heavy shot volumes, made some spectacular saves, just an absolute human highlight reel in the net. And I'm looking forward to more of that. So Spencer Knight is far and away my favorite player to watch this year on the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, a great one to note. You're saying that Spencer Knight, the best goaltender the Blackhawks have had in Chicago since Corey Crawford. You mean to say that Cam Ward wasn't your favorite, Tony, in that last stretch of time?
Me and Cam Ward have a tumultuous relationship.
Hey, fair enough. A couple of comments here before I share my thoughts here. Spalacy, Pridham, and Mustard could be the greatest third round in NHL draft history. That could be a hell of a third round from Kyle Davidson. Even if 2 out of 3 of those guys become regular contributors, that's already hitting at a better rate than most. Anthony's pick here was Donato. Says you always knew when he was on the ice. I'm going to go a little off the wall with mine. And maybe there was something to be said about almost a little bit of nostalgia, dare I say, with this player. Ooh, felt like righting a wrong as well, seeing him in the red, black, and white this year. The proper red, black, and white, not the red, black, and white that he's worn for the better part of the last decade. Teuvo Teravainen, I think, was my favorite guy to watch this year because it felt so good seeing 86 back in a Blackhawks uniform. It felt like it was something that I think every Blackhawks fan can look at all those trades as they dismantled this team. And what was the one for the future of the team from that time period onward that departed that you really looked back and went, son of a bitch, I wish they still had that guy. Teuvo Teravainen was largely a lot of people's answers. And
it was
felt
Nick
that
Leddy.
way too. No, it wasn't Nicoletti. I don't believe so, Tone. Although Nicoletti had a really good career, but I think Tavo was the one player that everybody was like, man, that guy should have still been a Blackhawk. And it was unfortunate that Bickle got sick and like the contract didn't work out. And so they tried to move it because they had to play cap gymnastics every year. It was really cool seeing Tavo Teravainen back in a Blackhawks uniform this year. I genuinely enjoyed watching him back in a Blackhawks uniform. And I feel like he's the perfect complement to this young team of like, he's just kind of quiet and he goes about his business and he's the guy that's going to dish the puck. And, you know, as they get these young shooters going, he's just going to be that guy and he's going to be throwing sauce passes to everybody. And I mean, just the way he passes the puck, I think was for me, the most intriguing thing, especially when you were at the United Center, the little touch pass on a big stretch pass, and he could just little touch pass without barely moving his stick 2 feet over to give the guy with speed coming a free entry into the offensive zone. Just the little plays, man, of a seasoned veteran who was like this one of those mid first round picks that the Blackhawks had mid to late first round picks the Blackhawks had a ton of during the great years of Blackhawks hockey because of where they were finishing the season in the standings. It's cool to see him have fully developed into like a really good pro and a really good scorer and just a really good overall hockey player, because I feel like so many of those guys either never maybe achieved the pedestal they were put on by the organization or completely fizzled out altogether and never even reached what most people would deem an acceptable first round value. So I think
I'm going to put this under the microscope on you right now, Ronald. Do you own a Tavo Teravainen jersey yet?
I do.
You do. Did you get one this year, or was it from prior years?
It was a this year one. I did not have it from prior years. I have a lot of jerseys from prior years, but unfortunately, there was not a Tavo in that mix.
I also acquired a Tavo Teravainen jersey this year as well.
Yeah, it was a good one. We went out there and got one. That's going to be a fun jersey. I'm going to enjoy wearing that at least for the next 2 seasons, if not longer. Anthony says they should have.
We're both clicking the
comment down here. I got it. They never should have traded Denault as well. Yeah, Denault just had a playoff winner for the LA Kings in their first game against the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah, he's probably the other one. In all those years when we used to bitch that they needed a third line center, and like he became a perfect third line center. That one, I think, certainly bit the dust a little bit there too. Gentlemen, favorite highlight, which this one feels like it's kind of become favorite game, which is okay. I think it's worthy of that. But we all have very unique answers. There's a little bit of overlap on some of these answers in different ways, which is, I think, going to be fun to discuss here. So we're going to just kick it around. And Steve, we'll let you start. What was your favorite highlight of the Blackhawks season?
You know, Ron, it was kind of hard to think of one because, like, last season it was easy. It was a lot of the stuff Bedard did, like his Michigan goal. And this season it was just kind of like, I don't know, it was like a giant shit dream that, like, we all suffered through. And I think for me, like you said, it wasn't necessarily like a particular moment. Mine was a game, and that would be Spencer Knight's first game as a Blackhawk. That was when they beat the LA Kings 5-1 at home. That was an outstanding performance. That was like, I mean, following up the Seth Jones trade, like didn't even know the trade was going to happen and could even pull it off the way that it was pulled off. And then on top of that, we get this amazing prospect goaltender, and he looks amazing. So that for me, it would have to be Knight's first game as a Blackhawk.
Tony, I tend to remember that one a little differently than by broadcast vision. Do you share in that sentiment?
Yeah, that was a great game to be at, Ron. I had a lot of fun. We had a night that night.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. It was. I want to say that was probably the first time, and I think I might have mentioned this a little earlier when I was waxing poetic about Spencer Knight and as my favorite player to watch. But that was really where I felt like this rebuild just like took a huge step forward in many, many ways. And to get a win out of it and him to look great, I thought that was a great night, no pun intended, in Chicago Blackhawks history.
It really was. And also a very fun Four Feathers night, because That
Was that the night of your stick challenge? The round
Yes, it was.
stick handling challenge.
That was. I will tell you right now, that was single-handedly the wildest night I've had at the United Center in terms of the during game festivities that we're not just watching the game. That was a very memorable game for a lot of different reasons, but certainly a fun one. Anthony Tony saying here last season it was the Chelios game, obviously with Kane getting the puck on the Indian head for the GWG in overtime. Still very vividly remember that. Was in attendance for that one as well, as was Tony. And then this year, Knight's debut, as Steve just said. Tony, from Anthony Tony to Tony, what is your favorite memory, favorite highlight of the season?
Favorite highlight has to be the Ryan Donato hat trick. I know that game didn't turn out the way that we wanted it to. However, first game that I was able to take my entire family to. Last season, I was able to bring my daughter to one of the games, and she was able to witness the Jason Dickinson hat trick. And then I think it was her second game this season. Gets to go. We brought the whole family this time and saw her second hat trick in she's been to about 4 or 5 games so far. She's already got 2 hat tricks. It's insane. That's a crazy rate of hat tricks for someone to get. But my wife's favorite player and my daughter's favorite player this year was Ryan Donato, and having the whole family there for a hat trick, pretty cool, special moment. So aside from the Blackhawks, losing that game, it was a happy ride home nonetheless. So I'm going to go and give the Donato hat trick probably the coolest moment. The crowd was loud that day, Ronald. I don't know if you were in attendance for that one. I believe you were.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I saw you in intermission on that game. It was a good game. I wish they pulled it out though.
I completely agree.
Hat tricks are cool and tough. Hat tricks are cool and tough, and we've got to put that out there.
Definitely,
Donato hat trick.
Fantastic game to attend. It was also 70 degrees that day, so it was fun wearing shorts at the United Center for a Blackhawks hockey game. It felt like a May playoff game, not an end of March Friday game. That was actually the day after my birthday, so yes, I was in attendance for that game. Lots of fun, despite the loss when it was all said and done. Gentlemen, it's funny. I was in attendance for both of your guys' favorites this year, and I was in attendance for mine as well. I had to really think about this because there was a lot of games that, Tony, we had on our ticket package this year that were really good that we just didn't attend. And one of those was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving game when they put up 7 goals on the Dallas Stars, and Taylor Hall had a hat trick in that game. Was not at that game. But the one game I was at, and I think because for me it was largely down the stretch one of the few games I actually got to tune into per se, outside of a few other ones for a variety of different reasons, was that Pittsburgh game and pulling out that win and getting to see Oliver Moore and Sam Renzel in person for the first time and watching them move around the ice and really getting a sense of the type of players they were and seeing Oliver Moore's speed in person, skating just as fast as guys like Frank Nazar and Ilya Mikheyev and others. They were super, super fun to watch. And Spencer Knight was really good that game too. It really felt like all the young kids kind of showed up and kind of did their thing in this one. And it was the penultimate home game of the season. It was their last win of the season at the United Center when it was all said and done because they lost in the shootout to the Jets in the home finale. I think that game just, to me, was the one, it was kind of the turning point game for me, I think, of okay, there's something here with these guys. There's something here with Sam Renzel. There's something here with Oliver Moore. And, and I know a lot of people think, they're first round picks. They should become superstars. Hockey ain't like that. If you're I believe the statistic is if you are drafted outside of the top 12 in hockey in the first round, you have the same likelihood of making the NHL as a 3rd round pick. It's a very big discrepancy. So a guy like a middle first round pick like Oliver Moore, maybe becoming a really solid middle 6 winger is okay. You'll take that as a win developmentally. Sam Renzel is a late first, 25th overall, turning into a potential workhorse defenseman. That's a win, even if he's not a perennial all-star every year and a guy that's winning Norris trophies, if he's able to be that workhorse on the blue line, that's still a huge moral victory when it's all said and done. So that one to me really stands out just because of it was kind of the one that ushered us into the off season. And again, being there in person certainly adds to that as well. And it was cool getting to see Sidney Crosby. It's hard not to enjoy seeing some of the greats in the game live in person, especially when they don't play for your favorite team. The next one is fun. We have to go low light because there was a lot of low lights this year, but there's got to be one that sticks out. I have one in mind. Maybe I can share mine first if everybody needs a moment to think. Mine,
I've got mine too.
Okay,
ready, locked, and loaded. But go ahead, sir.
Go ahead, Ron.
You got to throw it back to one of those great late doubleheader TNT games on a Wednesday night. It was when they played the Edmonton Oilers, and they were the second game, and it was dead at the United Center because it was a 9:00 puck drop on a Wednesday night.
They advertised it as an 8:30 start, but it didn't actually.
As they always advertise it as an 8:30 start, but it's never an 8:30 start. Actually, I think they advertise it as an 8:00 start. And really, it becomes more like a 9:00 start when it's all said and done. I digress. It was a night where Ron Luce was partaking in the legal activity in Illinois of sports betting. And I felt really good. I felt really good about that night. I was like, I'm going to take a Teuvo Teravainen an anytime goal scorer. And then I'm going to take him to get at least a point. So even if he gets the goal, it's a 2-for-1, and it's just going to boost the odds. And at least if he gets an assist, he's got another opportunity. And then I was feeling really spicy. I'm like, we got to go with a Leon Draisaitl goal. You have to. And then I was like, I'm feeling really spicy. It's going to be a 4-3 Edmonton win. And we bet the exact score. All as a part of a parlay. Teuvo Teravainen got his point. In fact, he had 2 points in that game. Leon Draisaitl scored. And the Blackhawks lost in overtime 4-3 to the Edmonton Oilers. But Lukas Reichel, at the last second, decided to get his stick on a puck off of Teuvo Teravainen's stick that was earmarked for the post and in, which would have nailed my 4-leg parlay, but rather was screwed by inches of a deflection out of a large sum of money. And then the biggest kick in the dick was still having to watch them lose when it was all said and done. That is my favorite low light of the season because it was a very, very memorable one.
I'm glad
I'm sorry, man.
I'm glad you finally shared this story with the masses.
The masses. This one's been in the chamber for a while.
Times. Yeah, I've heard this one a couple of times. It was a bad beat.
It was a bad beat. I mean, and I think a few people will remember it. Reichel was crashing hard in the net, and he made a good play. He made the right play. It should have been a deflection in, but when they showed the overhead, you could tell it was like, oh, this puck absolutely has a chance of going in off of Teuvo's stick. And had that happened,
I think I gave you shit for about a month because you're a big Lukas Reichel guy, and I was like, you're not happy that Lukas Reichel scored? You'd get mad at me.
I wouldn't call myself a big Lukas Reichel guy. I am a just not as angry about him as everybody else is. Lukas Reichel guy. Another guy that even if he's a fourth line forward, that's still technically a win for where he was drafted, and neither here nor there. Tony, you got one that you're ready to share?
Yeah, unfortunately, it comes at the worst spot on earth named Wrigley Field. But the Winter Classic. The Winter Classic was just a terrible, terrible showing for the Chicago Blackhawks in so many different ways. And Ryan, we got to spend it there together, and it was a good time. But the low light that comes from this, the reason I'm going to bring this up was the Nick Foligno fight. I don't think I've ever heard Blackhawks fans get louder than the anthem there, and then the Nick Foligno fight. I wish that they had put on a better showing because regardless of where they were, the amount of Hawks fans, the amount of people who root for the Chicago Blackhawks congregated outdoors on New Year's Eve to get that loud for the fight that took place. It would have been such a magical moment had they been able to actually compete in that hockey game. And also for the fact of watching Ron just get like really angry. So for those who are listening to the show and don't know, we go to the same games, but we sit a couple sections away from each other. I think we spent maybe 2 periods of hockey outside of of hockey.
A Spencer Knight game.
outside of the Winter Classic. I don't get to sit next to Ron at most of these games. So when we're sitting together and just watching Ron get progressively angrier at the Chicago Blackhawks during the Winter Classic is my low light of the season. It was a great time though. Our guy Pat Kaminsky was there. Steve, you were in attendance as well.
I
was. We never got to meet up, but I will admit I think we left a little bit early and tried to get ourselves as far away from Wrigley Field because you don't want to be around there after dark after a certain hour. So we got out of town. And the Blackhawks just did not do well. So my low light is just the Winter Classic as a whole was my favorite low light. Steve, you got one?
Yeah, I'm going to have to copy and paste you because the Winter Classic was also my low light of the season. And for me, that was, coming back home, brought my wife, who's only been in Chicago like a handful of times. So I was excited because this is like the perfect like Chicago thing to do. I was hoping it was going to snow a little bit. And I never went to a Winter Classic game, so I was beyond excited. So just to see what happened during that game, it was a letdown. And of course, on top of that, it was like kind of raining and drizzling on us the whole time. My wife was like miserable and like shivering inside of a poncho. I felt really bad, but yeah, like you were saying, Tony, like I was disappointed with like kind of like the rivalry with like the Blues fans and the Hawks fans. Because it started off great, and I don't really blame the Hawks fans for kind of dying out on the game, but like it just got to the point where like the section I was sitting in, people just stopped like chanting "Let's go Hawks!" Like I was like the last one to do it, and it was just kind of embarrassing because I was like belting it out, and like people were like looking at me like, "Dude, we're getting our asses kicked. What are you doing?" So yeah, that was my low light.
I was also yelling at Blues fans every time they try to say "Let's go Blues," and I'd be like, "Let's go Hawks!" Yeah, well, they're always
obnoxious,
dude. See, if you rooted for the right baseball team in the city of Chicago, you would understand how miserable St. Louis fans are having to deal with the Cardinals in the same division, and you would not have been surprised.
There's nothing wrong with the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't know what you're talking about.
You're the worst. Anyway. We'll keep it moving. This one, a little bit more kind of potentially future driven, but this one is favorite roster move. Now, explaining for those that are listening at home, what we mean by this is it can be anything from a call up during the season. It can be a trade. It can be a signing. So if somebody joined the team in the off season, that is totally in play and in game here as well. What was your favorite roster move from this season and why? Tony, we keep sandwiching you in the middle like the ice cream in one of those great cookies.
I just went first last time. We'll hand it to Steve here. I'll defer.
Back to Steve.
Here we go. Yeah, I think it's kind of obvious. The Seth Jones trade is mine. And I think that was huge. That was a lot of money that Kyle Davidson had to deal with, and then it kind of gets overlooked that he was able to negotiate what he got with the Florida Panthers, who I think they were the only realistic suitors at that point, because the other team, the Stars, they were like, yeah, we're good on Jones. We don't got room for him. And then the Panthers, like they gave the Blackhawks a first round pick and Spencer Knight. So absolutely brilliant trade. I don't think it gets talked about enough, to be honest.
Was quite a spectacular trade. Anthony Tony tends to agree. Says nothing beats the Jones trade. Tony Marchese, do you echo in that sentiment?
I don't. I do. I think that's like an obvious one. That's why I wanted Steve to go first. I didn't want to take that. If I'm gonna be honest, I felt like it was a little too obvious. I've said enough words about Spencer Knight. I've actually got a couple. But if I had to narrow it down, I think the addition of Pat Maroon was pretty big for the Chicago Blackhawks this year. When you sort of take a step back and look at things, at least myself as a Hawks fan, I was a little disappointed in how vocal Nick Foligno was this year with the team, especially in the early going. And then, Maroon sort of was the guy that was there standing up for everyone whenever he was in the lineup and on the ice. I thought it was really cool that it was his last year. And while he's not a guy that was, any sort of, a Blackhawk for life or anything, I thought the Pat Maroon edition really sort of just meshed well with this team in that fourth line for most of the year. So I know that one's really under the radar, but I thought it was really cool to get to watch Pat Maroon play his last season in the NHL. I thought he laid his body on the line for a lot of our young stars. You look at some of the guys and what they had to say about Pat Maroon throughout the rest of the season, and just how he was honored by Chicago when he retired. That's a guy that made an impact. And not a lot of people are going to write about him or talk about him as a Chicago Blackhawks player. Obviously, he's got a ton of history that's, elsewhere and on teams that I don't like. But for him to come here and do what he did in Chicago this year, drop the gloves and just stand up for the guys in the Indian head sweater, I think that was a really good veteran move that, not a lot of people, like I said, are going to talk about. So I'm going to give Pat Maroon as my favorite move this season.
I love that. I think that's and Anthony says here, nice take. I tend to agree. I think in hindsight, we can now appreciate his impact on the team. I think during the season, it got lost, and that was just because of the state of the team and where things were and where the focus was on this team. But I really do think that was important. I mean, he was wearing a letter by the end of the season. That's clearly not taken lightly, even on a team that is largely a lot of younger guys, and obviously had a lot of turnover over the course of the season. Steve, I agree. I think if we're going any one move, that trade needs to be in the Hall of Fame of trades, because even early on right now, it looks like it's going to pay large dividends. And I think 5 years down the road, we can probably all regroup and go, holy shit, what a trade that was. I mean, I think everybody feels that way as it is. Anthony Tony says one here, though. He says, most surprising move was burning the first year of Lev Schnell's contract. So the contract was going to burn no matter what. I think that's just an important connotation here. It's very easy to think about the CHL and the 10-game rule and things like that. When a guy like Levshunov, who was coming out of college and had no CHL rights and goes straight to Rockford, he's burning his first year of his pro contract no matter what, because he's still in the pros. But I think more so even just Levshunov coming up and playing and getting the amount of run he did in the NHL, even to Anthony Tony's point, is certainly a surprising one. I've got a really off-the-wall one, and I want to share this one because – to me, this is going to be one of the largest storylines of players already in the organization, what their future is with the team. And we don't realize it yet. But I really do think it's going to be that.
Laurent Brossoit.
No, not at all. You can keep your goalie takes to yourself, Tony. I promise. I'll let you keep that one with Laurent Brossoit, but still a storyline nonetheless. For me, I think the development and the up and down nature and how they handled Wyatt Kaiser this year was my favorite call up, because it was very clear that he came up, he looked a lot better than last season, but still not perfect. And he had the last few things that they wanted him to work on in his game. He went back to Rockford, did that, came back. And in my opinion, really found a nice home as one of those guys on the left side that maybe plays third line pair, but can move the puck really well, has a good first pass, and started to get into I don't notice him anymore on the ice area because he was responsible defensively and played really well. He's a restricted free agent, probably the biggest one the Blackhawks have. So his future and what he gets paid and what term he gets, to me, is a huge conversation starter for this offseason because of what is his role. Do they see him as a part of this top six for the future? Or is he just, man, we have too many guys and he's a guy maybe they move to try and improve a position of lesser, depth or what have you? To me, that one is really the most fascinating one, because he was the guy that I think I saw the most development in of anybody over the course of the season in terms of really taking that next step to being in my opinion, now a full-time professional. Like guaranteed, no question about it. Like I know Nazar is going to be up next year, but you can still see the developmental aspects of Frank's game that are coming along to make him that full-fledged, like, you're a pro, you've reached what we thought you were going to become. Here you are. Wyatt Kaiser, I think, did that this year. And the way they were able to use his call-ups and send-downs to me was perfect. So for me, and seeing some of these success stories with guys that aren't the big flashy picks in the first round or maybe highly regarded second-round picks, hitting on a guy that was a third-round pick and coming out of college and making the impact he's had and going through the growing pains he's had, that was a big developmental win for Kyle Davidson and company, I think, this year. And so that's why I wanted to highlight that one as my favorite roster move. And so it says here, Brossois in the Northwoods with Bigfoot. Yeah, we'll see
awesome.
where Laurent Brossois is next season.
Ronald, I love the Wyatt Kaiser take. And Steve, I think you and I have had like a couple of late nights where we've texted about Wyatt Kaiser and his development and talked about this. So I want to go to you, Steve. And where are you with Wyatt Kaiser? Because as I've told you, and I don't know if I've had this conversation with Ron, I might have, but I know I've had it with you. He really grew on me towards the end of the season. And Ron, you were high on him last year, but I want to give Steve like a minute to talk about where he's at with Wyatt Kaiser, because I agree with everything that Ron said, and I think that there's a decision that has to be made. Where are you at with him, Steve?
Yeah, last season, to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of Kaiser, and I like going into this season, I had low expectations for him, and honestly, I was higher on Ethan Del Mastro. Still kind of am, but Kaiser really stepped it up for this season. And I think it was just a lot of his defensive instinct, his offensive play. It improved. He made good reads. His angles in the offensive zone. He did a fantastic job, I thought. And like you were saying, where he wasn't noticeable in a good way, where last season and sometimes earlier this season too, I noticed that he was making, a lot of mistakes. And I think one of them cost him getting sent down to Rockford. So I thought as those mistakes kind of went away and he became less noticeable in a good way, where he was doing his job, sticking to his assignments, making good passes. So yeah, he impressed me. I thought he was pretty solid, and he's a restricted free agent. And if we're going to talk about maybe trading some of these young defensemen, I would love to keep him, but he could very well be somebody who could maybe move. But we'll see, I guess.
Tony, I don't know if you want to add anything. I just want to interject one quick thing before you add.
Yeah.
This is also being deemed the summer of the offer sheet, and does a Wyatt Kaiser offer sheet decision become something the Blackhawks have to worry about?
I didn't even. Oh man.
You know what? And Ron, we talked about how Kyle Davidson can be aggressive with the offer sheet. Unfortunately, yeah, I think Wyatt Kaiser is the kind of guy that could end up in that position, and that kind of, may screw some things up. He really did prove himself at the NHL level this year. He's down the stretch really became a guy that I thought was like one of the more responsible, and I don't even classify him as a veteran defenseman, but he looked like a veteran defenseman out there. I liked watching him play a lot more this year than I did in previous games that were played last year. I'll leave it at that. I think that that blue line crunch is coming, and it's coming sooner than later. And
speaking
this
of,
is tough. I hate the fact that you're gonna have to, like, we're already at the point in the rebuild where we're like, oh, you're gonna lose some guys.
Yeah. And that's why, again, with the contracts, even for guys like Bedard and Nazar and Knight, like there's a lot of decisions coming up this offseason, and Wyatt Kaiser certainly becomes one of those parts. I need to interject. Speaking of blue line crunch, the Rockford Ice Hogs win in overtime over the Chicago Wolves.
Hell yeah.
Playoffs.
Let's go, boys.
Artem Levshinov with the GWG.
No way.
For the Ice Hogs. Sanford and Gavin Hayes on the power play assisting
Let's go.
As Artem Levshinov sends the Rockford Ice Hogs home happy. They're up 1-0 in a best of 3 with the Chicago Wolves in the Calder Cup playoffs. So wanted to note that. I was kind of checking throughout the course of this show of what was going to happen. Artem Levshinov is your goal scorer to win. So Korchinski and Levshinov are your goal scorers for the Rockford Ice Hogs in a Calder Cup playoff win. And this game was at Allstate Arena up in Rosemont. So a local could have been it was probably a good night to be out there locally if you're either a diehard Ice Hogs fan or even a diehard Wolves fan, getting a look into the Blackhawks' future. One final favorite from the season that we have to get to, and this is just favorite memory in totality. So this can be anything, any affiliation to the Blackhawks season, indirect, direct, on the ice, off the ice, what have you. What was the thing that stood out the most to each of you over the course of this season? Your favorite memory in totality. Steve, we'll give you the floor once again.
It's going the opposite route of my least favorite, which I still pick the Winter Classic. So everything about the Winter Classic except the on-ice product, that was my favorite memory. And, like I try to come home to Chicago multiple times a year if I can. And whenever I do, if it's in the winter, you bet your ass that I'm going to try my hardest to catch a Blackhawks game. And this year, I didn't expect to even get tickets to the Winter Classic. My wife somehow made it happen. So I was looking forward to going to this game the entire year. And obviously just coming home, it was like Christmas for me. So it was awesome. And then of course, like right before then I joined you guys. So that was kind of a pretty sweet Blackhawks filled Christmas memory for me.
Hell yeah, that's incredible. Tony, is your favorite also the Winter Classic? I know you hate Wrigley Field, which is tragic, but
I do hate Wrigley Field. But that said, Winter Classic is up there. However, I don't have a favorite memory that could ever top the Loose on Tap Stick Challenge right outside of 325. But that was incredible. But on that note, my favorite memory isn't anything that happened on the ice. It isn't, a favorite moment or anything like that. It's just getting to spend time with friends and family that go to these Blackhawks games with me. Ron, you've been to a couple. Steve, I can't wait to see you at a game, man. It's going to be fun. But getting to spend time with my brother, my wife, my kids, friends, everybody who's able to attend a game with me. I got to bring my cousin, Nick, who's on Cubs on Tap with you, Ron, to his first Blackhawks game this season. So a lot of cool memories just with people. And I think that, sharing those experiences, seeing people at the game, that's my favorite. And it's one big collective. Not going to, name a favorite moment outside of Ron trying to do the stick challenge because that was awesome. But no, that's my favorite. And it's going to be my favorite probably every season unless you win a Stanley Cup, because what can beat that, right? But getting to spend time with, the people you care about at, the game is the best, and there's nothing better than that. That's what it's all about for me. So thank you to everybody who I got to see and hang out with and have beers with at Blackhawks games this season. Ronald, your favorite
100%.
moment, my friend.
Well, you stole my thunder because I was also going down that line of defense here. I will note, speaking of the Loose on Tap stick challenge, if the puck was heavier, I would have done better, but that's neither here nor there.
I'm trying to find it so we can see if we can screen share it out for everybody before we get out of here.
Yeah, we'll try not to. We're gonna try and get out of here before that. Everybody can go online and find it. It's on Four Feathers Pod. You can find it on socials, and be sure to follow at Four Feathers Pod if you're not already. I agree in that sentiment. I think this year was really cool because attended the game with a ton of people. Obviously, Tone, getting to see you consistently. I got to go to a game with my mom this year. My fiance joined me to a slew of games. A bunch of good friends of mine also joined me to a handful of games as well. So just kind of the people experience of it all. And even something that was really cool was getting to meet Stuart, a fan of ours, a listener from Belfast. So, I mean, how cool was that to, be able to meet some other people? And I think just the people interaction in general of the United Center is always my favorite part of the season because, there was moments where like random people would come up and talk to us of like just about whatever, and like to the point where they would walk away and you'd be like, what the hell was that? What just happened? Or the weird interactions you have with somebody. I think one in particular that I can recall was earlier this season. One of my first games, I ran into a guy and he had a Brian Campbell jersey on. I was like, I love your jersey. That thing is so sick. It's fantastic. I love it.
We saw some cool jerseys this year.
100%.
We saw some cool jerseys.
And lo and behold, he was the guy that had seats next to me, and he was also a season ticket holder. And it was just like, so that interaction was fun. Like that to me is always my favorite part of the season. Tony, to echo what you said, right? Obviously, if they win a championship, that probably just a little higher. But overall, man, it was a fun year. The Winter Classic was awesome. Obviously, a lot of changes here at Four Feathers too. I think that have been a lot of fun. Steve, you joining on and becoming a part of this thing as well, certainly ranks up there. In addition, a quick comment here from Anthony says, never thought Jones would be moved. Getting rid of that locker cancer and getting Knight in a first was awesome in all capital letters. It really was awesome. Gentlemen, we're going to have plenty of time. We're already approaching the hour 20 mark here for this episode, and we'll largely keep it to this past season. But before we get to what's on tap next, because we have a lot of great content coming up over really the next couple of months here as the offseason really gets underway, we got to get to the habitual segments, at least for one last time in terms of the regular season. We got to start with ruffling some feathers. And I think Steve needs to go first again. Yeah, are you ready to ruffle some feathers?
Yeah, I am. So I think a lot of people are kind of attached to this idea that it's okay to just send a lot of these prospects to the AHL if that's like a check in the box step. For me, I think especially right now, all these prospects that we have that's on the roster, maybe not Green, maybe not Oliver Moore. I think none of those kids should spend another second in the AHL. I think it's going to benefit them long term if they just start next year in the NHL. And I think it's going to be better for their development. Yeah.
I love that. It's spicy. I think it's fun, though. I think, too, you mentioned a little earlier, Steve. I just want to bring attention to this because I think it further helps ruffle some feathers. As you noted, the AHL might not be the best developmental league per se because it is still a league of guys who are trying to earn a paycheck and get back up to the NHL. The Wyatt Kaiser experiment's a perfect usage case, I think, of the AHL. Let them come up, see what they need to work on, send them back down, bring them back up. It's not a death sentence to go down to the AHL or even start that season in the AHL. Maybe they get a call up later, whatever it is. But like you said, if they don't need it, it's not a check the box that needs to happen, especially in the way the state of the roster is at this point. Tony, are you ready to ruffle some feathers?
Yeah. This one may open up some discussion, so I'm going to keep it kind of short. The Blackhawks do not need the number one pick in the 2025 NHL draft. And you should not freak out if they are picking 2 or 3.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think
I know you guys probably agree with that. There's a lot of people who agree with it. However, I'm sure there are people out here who are going to listen to this and say, "Why don't you want the number one pick?" I think it's okay. This is not going to hurt you. I think it actually might hurt the Hawks more if they have the number one pick this season than if they get 2 or 3. Not that I'm going to be mad if they have the number one overall pick. Sure. However, I think you just hold your horses, let it play out. It's not going to be bad if they don't get the number one overall pick. Ronald, I'll pass it to you.
I completely agree. Honestly, if it was up to me, I'd be sending that top 4 pick to the Ottawa Senators for Brady Tkachuk, but that's neither here nor there. And that is not my ruffle some feathers. That's just a true feeling of mine. I've had that feeling, I think, since the Four Nations face-off. My ruffle some feathers, gentlemen, is it's always a bummer when a Blackhawks season comes to an end because I genuinely enjoy the ride and the roller coaster that was, as tonight's episode is titled.
So you're ready for October?
No, on the contrary, mon frere. It's GM Ron season, baby. I'm stoked. This is my time to shine, damn it. I love this part of the year. I'm such a sicko and psychopath for this time of the year. It's my favorite. I am all about it. I cannot wait to hyper-analyze shit that's not going to happen, but that's just what GM Ron does. And I will say this, and I have evidence to prove it that I can share out to the world. Last season, I built an ideas board at the beginning of the year. It was draft picks to analyze, potential signings, and trade ideas. Teuvo Teravainen naturally was in my players to potentially sign. I had all 3 Blackhawks first-round picks in my list, and it wasn't a huge list of draft prospects. It was probably 10 to 12 names. I had all 3 first-round picks in that list. And I had a Spencer Knight trade, question mark, as one of my trade ideas. So there's GM Ron thrives at this time of the year. Absolutely thrives. Like the week of the draft plus the start of free agency is perhaps one of the greatest of the 52 that we get every single time that we spin around the sun. It is spectacular. I can't wait. July 1st is my Christmas morning. So when I sound excited this offseason, folks, I know people miss hockey. Tony, I know you miss hockey. Steve, I know you miss hockey. I miss hockey too. But this is my time to shine. And so I'm going to enjoy every single second of it. Summer for me is going to be fun, even if it is baseball excluded, because this is when we have a lot of fun when it comes to Blackhawks and ideas of what the future looks like.
And that's why you have a PhD in salary cap geography, my friend.
PhD in salary cap geography.
Still paying off his student loans, by the way.
Always paying off the student loans. Stick taps. We got to get to some stick taps. The good to conclude this season. Steve, once again, the floor yours.
I want to give stick taps to fellow Original Six team, the Montreal Canadiens, for making that trade during brain farting on the draft year. But when we got Kirby Dach over to Montreal, because if that doesn't happen, we don't get Frank Nazar. And that really came to light in the Blackhawks' second to last game when Nazar showed up and looked fantastic. And in my opinion, he looked better than Ivan Demidov. So thank you, Montreal.
Hell yeah. Maybe a little ruffle some feathers too in there with your stick tap. But I love it. Yeah. Again, another trade that people are going to look back on in the 2022 draft. Kevin Korchinski is acquired with a pick that they got for Alex DeBrincat. Frank Nazar acquired with the pick acquired for Kirby Dach as well at number 13. And he's even starting to look like a draft steal at that 13th position. A lot of people in draft redrafts labeling him a top 5 or top 6 pick as it all stands right now. Tony, stick taps from you.
I'm going to defer to you, Ronald, and then I'll close it down.
Fair enough. My stick taps go to the children, to the kids of the franchise and the organization, and not for the youths, and not for any given reason, but I think it's the impact and the hope that they've instilled in a lot of people that maybe Kyle Davidson actually knows what he's doing from a talent evaluation process, and that this front office is trustable and their scouting department is still quality and strong, and they can build a new wave of competitive Blackhawks hockey. I'm not going to promise it's a next golden age. I'm not going to promise it's a next championship age. Hell, I'm not even going to promise it's a perennial playoff contending age. But it's an age of good assembled talent that's a shot in the dark and a swing at trying to get this organization back into the relevance that it deserves and experienced for a full decade when they were winning Stanley Cups. Things are looking up, and I think it's okay to be excited about what's to come. And speaking of some of those trades that were happening, Hawks picked Kevin Korchinski, Paul Ludwinski, and AJ Spalacy with those Alex DeBrincat picks, and he's not even in Ottawa anymore. So, again, I think the kids restoring the faith to people of what Kyle Davidson is doing I feel like we were some of the few that were banging the table of Kyle Davidson's doing the right thing and just give him time when everybody was calling for his head and saying it was time to move on because Bedard's miserable and they're terrible and this isn't the right move. On the contraire, mon frere, the kids restored life into that argument that Kyle Davidson is doing the right thing. And so for that, I think the kids, because the kids, stick taps to them, there's hope again in the world of Blackhawks fandom.
Well said. You got the kids. Steve, you had Montreal for Nazar. My stick tap doesn't go to a player that's on the ice. It doesn't go to anyone in the front office. In fact, it doesn't go to anybody that's part of the Chicago Blackhawks organization. You know, sometimes people find themselves in a situation where they're not even on the roster when you start the year, and they join the team and they pick up an essential role and they knock it out of the fucking park, and they do things that you didn't even think you were going to have at the beginning of the season. My stick tap goes to Steve right here. Steve, you fucking killed it this year. You came on board for Feathers. You came on Tap Sportsnet. You knocked out pretty much every recap from the day you joined. Roster transactions, you picked up part of being part of the show. You really helped us out. And so my final stick tap of this season goes to you, my friend. It's awesome to have you on board here. I think Ron probably echoes that. I see him shaking his head. But my stick tap goes to you, man. We're really happy to have you here. And you kicked ass this year. So thank you for everything that you did and picked up for both Ron and I to help keep bringing content to Chicago Blackhawks fans, man. It's been incredible. And Ron, I'll echo that and put it to you too. We've been doing this for 6 years now. It's been a long ride. We've had people come, we've had people go. We've had really essential members of this organization and everything that we try to bring to Chicago Blackhawks fans in terms of content. Steve, you picked it right up. You kicked ass. Ron, it was another great year of covering the Chicago Blackhawks with you guys. This is an extremely fun part of my life, and I'm really happy to share the microphone with both of you and everybody else who's been on here. It's been incredible, and I can't wait for the future, and I can't wait to call do podcasts for winning Blackhawks teams. As I said, we've been doing this for 6 years. We had a Mickey Mouse playoff in the COVID years that we got to do this for. I can't wait till we get to the point where, this team is playing playoff hockey, and to get to do this would be so fun. And again, another stick tap goes to the listeners and everybody who comes in here, comments, interacts with us on X, interacts with us on the show, all this stuff. It's so fun to do this. And I'm very thankful that we have this platform and what we get to do. But Steve, man, number one stick tap goes to you. I feel like I'm giving out 3 stars. Ron, you get the second star, and everybody else who's part of this, y'all get the 3rd star. But thank you to everybody. This is incredibly fun. I want to bring more content to everyone next year. And as this team grows, I hope this podcast grows and we can turn this into something. This is awesome. So thank you to everybody who makes this what it is. Again, stick taps around everybody. Ron, I turn it back over to you.
A hell of a curtain call at the end. And yes, echoing in your sentiments, sir, to you, Steve. An incredible addition to our group here at Four Feathers Podcast. It was not a good year of Four Feathers prediction trackers for those that are curious. Bad. Hopefully we'll be better in the near future. In addition to that, what's on tap next for us here at the Four Feathers Podcast? Off-season stuff is a-coming. We got plenty of content lined up already. A couple crossovers and some collaborations coming with other Blackhawks content creators. We're very excited about those opportunities that'll be coming on the horizon as well. In addition to that, we're doing our player grades as we do every year. Everybody's getting their blurbs into the old Google sheet, and maybe we'll be able to debate some grades on one of these episodes during the off season, because we got some differing opinions. A couple of them are very similar, but a couple of them are very very off the wall and different as well, which will be a lot of fun. In addition to that, just notable newsworthy milestones that are going to happen over the next couple of months. A head coaching hire, as we discussed a little bit earlier, and we'll get certainly into more as the weeks come and go, as well as the NHL draft at the end of June. That'll definitely pick up for us as the month of June turns, and we'll be focusing on that. And then, of course, my Christmas morning, July 1st, which is the beginning of NHL free agency, and see what the Blackhawks do in the open market come this year. And, of course, July 1st is when Bedard and Nazar and Knight are all eligible for extensions. Could those be coming on the horizon as well? So all of that coming from the Four Feathers podcast as we wane into the summer months. And as Tony notes, everybody patiently waits for October and what this new look Blackhawks team will be in 2025-26. Gentlemen, one final toss around the horn here. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yes. Thank you guys for the kind words. It means a lot. Happy to be here, proud to be here, and let's go Hawks.
I love the Blackhawks, and I'm incredibly high on the Hawks right now. I can't wait for next year. Ronald, Steve, this has been great. I hope that we all get the coaching hire that we want when we get that news. I hope that the draft goes as planned. I hope that free agency and Ron's Christmas is just fantastic, and he wakes up that morning and heads down to the Christmas tree and unwraps a lot of great gifts for not only himself, but for Chicago Blackhawks fans. And again, I can't wait to get to October, but there's a lot to get to in between now and then. As Ron said, guys, it's like I said before, it's been incredible. This was probably the worst team that I loved. So let's go Hawks.
Ain't that the damn thing? Anthony says here, go Hawks. You guys say let's go Hawks. And I agree. It's GM Ron season. That's my closing thought. And let's go Hawks, baby.